Ndinga mtakanding. Imagine playing the long game and having it pay off. Today we sit with a 2-times charter holder and the industry's latest chief investment officer. He's a CIO at Perpetua Investment Managers, an investor and an advert market commentator. Welcome to the Charters Table.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
I'm glad you could join us to have this conversation. It's actually a departure from what you normally talk about, which is markets. But that's exactly why we need to have this conversation. So I'm excited to hear your story.
Often I find it's actually easier to talk about markets and it's comfortable. So I think it'll be an interesting perspective.
And maybe one more thing before we continue. Congratulations on your promotion.
Thank you.
It's quite inspiring to see your journey and to have watched your journey. So before we dive in, actually, maybe tell us who Lonwabo is, and one interesting thing about you.
Okay, yeah, we'll do. Yeah, I mean, I think by way of background, I grew up in the Eastern Cape, in Mthatha, which is an interesting place on its own. Obviously in the 80s. I think early formations, I spent a lot of time with, my grandparents. So really instilled values, just humility, values, love. I was a household filled with love, which I remember with fond memories. And then I actually went to boarding school. I think I was 10 at the time. So that was quite an adjustment. In the Eastern Cape. Again, also, I think it was quite important from a formative perspective. I think I became a lot more independent and had to grow up very quickly. So I look back with it and actually see that it was very beneficial, for me. I think it was also a very astute move by my parents. I think they could, obviously, as the schools opened up, the old Model C schools opened up, and now you had opportunities that they hadn't had before, and so they jumped at it actually, and was a very astute move, very formative as well. I think interesting thing. I would say I enjoy reading a lot. Reading about different things. These days, it's more about history. I've been stuck on history for the last couple of years.
Oh, nice.
So I'm enjoying that. So it's.
And what book are you reading now?
So currently I'm reading a book called Guns, Steel and Germs. And it's really just trying to understand what's shaped the way the world has turned out today.
Yeah.
From wars to the role that pandemics played, smallpox, chickenpox, and how actually that they decimated societies.
Yes.
And then, those societies then had to recover. So it's been, and then obviously the role of industrialization, and why some societies specialized quickly.
Yes.
Whereas others didn't specialize, and typically then they didn't survive, because of that.
Sure.
Yeah. So
sounds very. Your downtime you spend it very interesting.
Yeah.
So how was boarding school though?
Yeah, boarding school. It is an adjustment, and obviously different kids from different backgrounds, and some are older, so you also then have to learn how to, you got to defend yourself, form a group and be quite strong. I think the great thing actually, when you look back with hindsight, you end up with I say it's a band of brothers that basically you grew up with, that we've kind of stuck together through the years. and then I do think that independence component is what was an important one. You know, that you gotta look after yourself, you gotta clean after yourself. You know, you've gotta do the work.
Yeah.
I think it's also good in that you get more involved in the schools, etc. You know, so that that was also beneficial from that perspective.
Yeah.
I think but I would definitely say that the big thing that I remember that sticks with you the most is that band of brothers.
Were you there for the rest of your schooling career?
Yeah, so I was there for
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering how you kept contact with the people afterwards at the time, because I also went to boarding school for 1 year. I was also 10, coincidentally.
I got you.
But I was there for 1 year.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, obviously, it was before phones and all those things. So I never really got to keep contact with the guys.
Makes sense,
So I was just wondering.
So it was there for the entire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then maybe there's something else I just wanted to unpack that you spoke about in your intro. You were speaking about like you grew up in a family of love. How was that like? You know, because I can imagine it was quite something.
I think at the time you kind of take it for granted.
Yeah.
You know, it's only when as you get older that you receive, you know, the environment that you're in. And I think especially with grandparents, they tend to be a lot softer by the time you come around, you know, and so the way they treat you is not the same how they treated your parents.
Yes.
Which was interesting. You know, so some of the stories I remember hearing, and I couldn't believe that this was the same person they were talking about. You know, so they're a lot more mellow, you know, a lot more consultative. And they generally, you know, kind of ask questions as opposed to give the instructions. And that actually had a big impact on you because now you've got to think about what you're doing. Yeah, so
What do you think that comes from?
I think where it actually comes from is mistakes. They look back and they're like, oh, you know, actually maybe I could have done this better, and you know they would have maybe made a mistake or two raising their own kids, and then they're like, actually, if I could do it again, I would change this and I would change that, and so you're the beneficiary of that. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
You told me you've got a family. So you've got two.
Yes.
So are you finding yourself actually having to go through that same journey now as they are growing up, that you are now having to?
Yeah. So it is actually interesting with this generation in that they're a lot more outspoken than we were and we are. And I think it's across the board. You know, I think it's across the parenting group actually that they're a lot more outspoken. And so the way you parent them is very, you know, we tended to listen to instructions and hear what our parents said, whereas they want to debate what you say, which you've got to actually give them the space to have that voice and then know where the line is. So they also need to know to kind of know where the red lines and where they shouldn't cross. But so that's an interesting journey.
Yes, I can imagine it is. So now I wanted us to move on to go talk about how you moved from high school into university. So how did you select the university you went to, and also how did you end up choosing the degree that you ended up studying?
Yeah. So I think we were fortunate at the time in the sense that universities are not as full as they are today. So obviously there's multiple applications versus openings. That currently is the case today. Whereas I think when I was kind of around my time, you could almost pick and choose as long as your marks were, were good enough to get in. And so me and a friend of mine, we decided that UCT was the one that we would go to, and that was actually the only one we applied to. And we both got in. So it just kind of gives you a sense of the opportunity at the time. And then in terms of deciding what to study, really the options for me I felt were either in accounting or medicine. I probably felt quite equally the same about the two. Slightly probably leaning more towards medicine at the time.
Yes.
And then I think what maybe caused me to flick the switch was the accounting department responded sooner. And then I was like, well, then this is, gaining a direction of its own. And I would say possibly at the margin, my father was a doctor and I probably didn't want to follow the same route.
Yes.
So those are probably the two things that caused me to decide the way I went. But yeah.
Okay.
So it wasn't really very scientific, unfortunately. Yeah.
Dr. Lonwabo Maqubela.
Yeah.
Could have been you. But okay. Oh wow. That's an interesting one in terms of how you ended up at UCT. I think the one other thing I wanted to know is maybe how your experience of university was at the time, because I can imagine a different time.
Yeah, I think it's a good question because I think so. What I underestimated, so because I was in boarding school and away from home, pretty much my entire growing up, right? I thought this is going to be an easy adjustment. It's whereas actually I found it a lot more difficult. Like different city, different people, and maybe. At the time you didn't appreciate it, but you then begin to realize the different backgrounds, different income levels, that now as the wider society, you get a sense of where everyone comes from, and so that was a much bigger adjustment actually than I had anticipated. You then have to say, well, how am I going to adjust? What are the coping mechanisms I'm going to put in place? To do so. It was helpful that I already came with like a group of friends, and then also you do form friends as well, so that plays an important role. And then I think in a strange way I found actually in that I became more serious as opposed to less serious.
Oh.
So often like in first year people can lose their way,
yes,
and they think they're there. They forget why they're there. But I actually found the opposite journey, that I became increasingly more serious as time kind of went on.
Do you think your staying at boarding school also helped? Because you already had the freedom, so to say, in inverted commas. So you going to university now, you didn't need to sort of now, run away from the parents because you're already away from them.
I think it's a good point you raise. I mean that you already have that freedom. It's not a new thing, but at the same time, like boarding school had a lot of guardrails. So once those were removed, then you actually have to choose who you're going to be. I think that everyone faces that kind of, I'd say, that period. Is quite a formative period of deciding who you're going to be, and I think so. What happens is that the risk that one faces is that you just go along with it. You don't think about who do I want to be. You just say, do the next thing, and do the next thing and do the next thing, and then it's only when you take a step back and you're like, oh, hold on, this isn't who I want to be.
Yeah.
So I think the advice I would give anyone would be that first 2 years, you've got to decide who you want to be, as opposed to going along with, who you end up being. But
that's actually quite true. Because university you meet a lot of characters.
Yeah.
And I think we all still trying to figure ourselves out. And if you take on an identity of somebody else, you might end up going the wrong direction. Okay. Yeah. And then what else in your varsity experience was stood out for you?
So it was a period of being stretched, like academically, so it didn't, I think especially as the year, especially that accounting, the failure rate is high.
Yes.
But it's not just accounting, it's many degrees where actually people don't, that you see how high that failure rate is. And so you are being stretched, you know, and you're kind of being forced to keep up with the pace. So I would say like it does become important, like to understand like what's gonna what are my coping mechanisms, you know. So yeah, not just about how many hours do I put in, which is important, right? But it's then kind of what other mechanisms am I putting in place to make sure I've got sufficient support.
Yes.
So be it, a lot of universities provide counseling and you know, and support, and so I would say that people should tap into those, you know, all those pastoral care components of it are important. So yeah, so I would definitely encourage people to, you know, and which I also then kind of used, and then actually became a very important component.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I actually never did. I only thought of those if like maybe there was something fundamentally wrong. But I do recognize now in hindsight that like having support and in whatever form can actually help you as you progress through life. You don't have to be falling apart in order to, you know, to be talking to professionals and people that can assist you, because they've seen this many times before.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then I wanted to, so you've got you're a chartered accountant.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So maybe take us through that and how like earning your charter was like.
So I think after varsity, then obviously would have gotten into articles, which I did mine at Ernst & Young in the Johannesburg office, and I was in the financial services division, which could not have asked for anything better. So I had a lot of the banks as clients, and actually those audits were month-long audits, you know. So for 6 months of the year or something, you'd be at a single client. So I could not have thought of a better kind of setting for me. And so and part of that, actually, I ended up with quite a few pension fund clients that I used to audit. Now, so I mentioned that, so the pension funds at the time were typically thought of as the less interesting clients. You know, often you were given a week to complete the audit. It was high, you were on your own. It was, tight deadline. And why actually it became interesting is that's what opened my eyes to asset management, and the industry. And so for me, it was a field day. It was really an eye opener, and ultimately, I think, the most underestimated element to articles is the fact that you're seeing a lot. You're meeting new people, and you're seeing different businesses, different clients, and you actually get a chance to sample what will work for you. Yes. So I often say, for people that are unsure about which path they're going to take their career, etc., that doing your articles is a good idea, because you're going to see a lot and something is going to grab you. And obviously for me it was asset management, and then so just got through the exam. I stayed at UCT and for honors. So by the time actually it came to the to doing the exams, both exams, it actually having passed the UCT, it was much harder to pass that than to pass the exam. So it actually felt very comfortable to that final year was very rigorous, and so you were well prepared by the time you left. So that component to it was, yes, it was hard work, but it wasn't difficult. And then I'd say, I think, in articles is obviously it's long hours.
Yes.
But it also teaches you a lot about about learning, working in teams, taking responsibility, meeting deadlines, having difficult conversations. So often you'd have to go, to firstly to a client and say, please explain this to me and make sense of it. and then finally you grasp it, and then you finally say, actually, you need to make an adjustment. This number doesn't make sense. It looks like it should probably be more like that. And so how do you have that conversation? In a way that you can get, you can find an agreement. And obviously with working with seniors and partners as well, and kind of managing that. So so there's definitely it's a good learning ground.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what was your favorite memory of the CA journey?
I think for everyone, the day you get your results is it's really memorable. And we, at the time as well, the firm actually, iPods had just become a thing. And so they gave us like iPods as a gift, and it was, you really felt like, things are happening now.
That's an interesting gift. Do they still do that?
I wonder. It's probably iPhone now.
Oh, jeez. And then, so what I wanted to, so you told us how you sort of found out about investment management. So how then did you make that transition into investment management?
Yeah.
And I think as a segue to that, then you then decided to do your second charter.
Yeah.
So then, like, as if the first one was not enough.
Yeah.
So you please take us through your thinking there and
yeah.
why. Yeah.
Okay. So quite early, probably by my third year, very early in my kind of in the beginning of the year, my mind was set that I'm going into asset management. At the time, I'd already also started trading my own portfolio. I was started briefly doing my own models, and so I felt like I was it's where I was naturally going.
Yeah.
And so everyone at the time was now deciding what's going to be the next stage of their careers. Some wanted to go overseas and go on JIT and go and audit in New York, and I did not want to do that. I was quite clear that I actually wanted to go into asset management. And so by the middle of the third year, I had already actually gotten an employment contract with Allan Gray, to become an analyst. And you can imagine that from the middle of the third year till the end of the year, there were many options being thrown at you.
Yes.
Which I wasn't biting. So it was quite clear to me where I was going. And so that, and that decision actually never changed or wavered. Yeah. And it was helpful that I, again, like the pension fund clients, I had an insurance client.
Yes.
That also, that also helped me kind of get a bigger view into the asset management.
And then CFA, how did you?
Yeah, and then sorry about that. Yeah, so then CFA, I think it's once I started working at Allan Gray, they encouraged you to start your CFA, and so that's kind of how I started. CFA is it's a journey, and the hours you can I often joke that when you are working and studying, pretty much your entire life is unhappy with you. Your friends are unhappy with you. Your books are unhappy with you because you're not spending enough time, and your bosses are unhappy with you, because you're not spending the necessary time or all your time at work.
Yes.
And so it's quite a delicate balance, So, and it does take a lot of commitment, and I'd say outside of work hours, to be able to get those hours in, whilst delivering at work. So whilst the start of it, was through kind of being encouraged to do it, towards the end of it, it's more your commitment towards it, and just the hours and the goal and the desire, they then drive you to continue. And I think, if you think about, for example, the CFA 3's got you've probably got a good crop if you've got a 50% pass rate, so
yes, yeah,
so it's going to be hard, So yeah, it's going to be a journey, and you've got to persist. Yeah, I think that was probably the big lesson actually from, I think, having sailed through life and kind of studies and never really struggled in that sense. The CFA was a struggle for me, and so it was important because I kind of it kind of forced me to learn about persistence and continuing. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe let's spend a bit more time on that.
Yeah.
When you say it was a struggle, what do you mean?
Yeah. So I think so firstly, just to get the hours, it was you really have to find them and manufacture them, 4 a.m.s, etc. To get it done. And then I think it was CFA 2 that I struggled with the most, so I failed it and kind of didn't got hit by the volume, and some components actually I look back and said I didn't really understand it very well. And so I really had to spend time on it to finally get through it. Whereas 3 I thought was easier, but certainly I found 2 was, two was challenging. Okay. I don't know if it's still the same, but yeah.
Okay. And so given that you said that you had sailed through most of your life, and then 2 is where you sort of got a stampede on your journey of academia, if I may call it that. What did you learn from that?
It's easy to say I had to learn persistence.
Yes.
I had to learn kind of actually, and also like a key component actually is not to this thing of separating yourself from the result. Often we tend to impute what we think about ourselves based on the result.
Yes.
I actually then had to separate that and say, the result doesn't define me, and so that was also quite important. So not just learning to, yes, I must persist and yes, I must continue, but actually just because I stumbled at this, it doesn't define me. So I think that was also quite critical to kind of step that I had to go through. I think, and then lastly, probably it sounds technical, but the preparation, I had to learn that actually the preparation the first time around wasn't that great. It was very monotonous because I was really just trying to get through the volume. And then now I had to throw more at the preparation, and not just more of the same, but kind of different things, and doing more past papers, and so that, as an example, so it was varying the preparation so that it's not the same. So that was also quite important, that if something doesn't work the first time, you can't keep going the same way and expect a different result.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, that is. I can attest to that. If I may, I also failed my level 2. It's very technical and there's a lot of volume. But quite interestingly, I don't think 2 is the hardest one. I think 3 is the hardest one. I think it's just of how you have to think in the 3rd exam. It could also be because of my background, because I've got an engineering background, so that would have given me the technical rigor aspect of it. I think 3 was where I had to sit and sure. Okay, what does a portfolio manager think like? What does a wealth manager think like? And actually take all these concepts now that I've been learning the last few years and actually apply them. So that was my experience of it. But a lot of people do say 2 is the hardest one. They say 2 has got a lot of bodies.
A lot of bodies.
Okay, so I'm interested in how you felt now actually when you got that last email, when it tells you now you've passed level 3.
It's more relief. It's more relief than joy. That it's paid off, and think also the fact that you struggle to get it makes it more valuable. You know, so that's also. I think, and I guess the big takeaway then becomes that, oh, you know what, if I don't make it at first, you know, it's not the end of the world. Like I can keep going and keep persisting, and it's actually when you finally get there, it's just so much more valuable to you.
Yes. Yeah. So I just needed to, you know, maybe touch on something you said. When you failed, you had to learn to separate the result from yourself, right? So then when you pass, how then do you do the same?
No, exactly. I think it's important in both, you know, that like when you've actually done well, that you don't, you know, or you've got the outcome, that you don't become the outcome.
Yeah.
You focus more on what is the process, you know, that I can take away from this, you know, that I can continue with it. Okay. You know, and like a good process actually would be like, geez, I mean, you know, I've actually got to read a lot to, you know, so just generally, you know, going forward. And so that's something that like I was like, oh yeah, great. You know, often the qualifications can deceive you into thinking that you've arrived, and actually part of what you're supposed to learn is that you need to continue to read and continue to learn, and to learn like best practice from for example, some of the stuff that CFA charter holders are writing and what they come out with in their magazines. And it's all eye-opening, your journey of continued learning. So,
yes. Okay.
So I think the way is you celebrate, yes, but then you got to quickly realize you know, there's a task at hand.
Yes. Okay. That's quite interesting. Yeah. So now, if you could go back and talk to yourself at the start of the journey, what would you say?
You're gonna have to be patient. You're gonna have to, you know, it's gonna take you longer than you think, but it'll be worth it. Yeah, that would be the kind of message I would share with myself.
As your poster card.
Yes. Okay. You know, it would just say keep going.
Yes. Or keep walking. Yeah. And then so now you've done your studies. You're at Ellen Gray. You're a trainee analyst. So how did you then decide to leave a big corporate to go join a startup asset manager or boutique?
Yeah. No, I think, I mean, it's if I had to go to one of my parents and say, all right, this is now what I'm going to do, they're going to think, are you crazy, child? You know, so it's a good question. And I would say that, I will have to use the word that I think it probably is a calling. There's something inside of you that's saying you want to do this. You know it's going to be more difficult than staying at a large asset manager.
Yes.
But that's what actually appeals to you. You know, that's what drives you. So I kind of had sat down and I kind of tried to think about the two paths and how they might work. You know, the outcome of the two paths. And I thought, actually, knowing myself, I would be far more happier with this path than the other path.
Yes.
You know, at a large established corporate. So it definitely, like, this appealed to me a little bit more. You know, to go down this route. And for various reasons, but you know, I do feel that so even though, you know, the kind of today, and I in fact still felt this when I was doing my articles, when I thought about the structure of the asset management industry, I did actually think that it needs to fragment, you know, that it needs to grow kind of outside the large names. You know, and that I remember that realization hitting me, you know, in 2006, and I've kind of still been on that journey today, so I definitely would say it actually, that kind of decision is driven intrinsically, like what motivates you, what really motivates you.
Yeah. So then where did you meet Delphine?
Yeah, so I worked with sorry, that is the other component to it. So I worked with Delphine at Allen Gray.
Delphine is the founder of...
She's the founder at Perpetua, yeah. And I actually had left Allen Gray before she did. Yeah, so like a year before. And, part of then I then joined Stanlib kind of for about an 18-month period. And it actually was a time that and Stanlib was, the good was a they had great people, and it was a time that I used to kind of help me think about what do I want long term. Which wasn't something at the door that I'd opened up, but now I started to open that up more. Yeah. And that's when it came to me that okay, actually, I do want to be in this endeavor, in trying to grow an asset management business, and so that was where my frame of mind was.
Yes.
And I then reached a point where I said to myself, yes, but you really would need to do this with the right people, and I kind of looked around and I said, there's kind of no one that I felt that would tick that box from my perspective, or rather from where I was at.
Yes. And
so I kind of parked it, and then when Delphine was kind of came out and starting Perpetua, it was like a hand and a glove that fit. So I then reached out to her, and I kind of said the journey I've been at and what are my priorities and where I want to go and so on. And it really was a meeting of minds. And I'd say that it's I remember at the time reading Stephen Covey's The Speed of Trust, and just really speaks about like how, when there's that element of trust between individuals and a team, you get much more done more effectively. You've got a meeting of minds, and which then allows you to move at far greater speed. And I kind of felt it was quite appropriate, because that's how I thought about it. And yeah.
Wow. So your story is quite interesting. You've actually had like a very interesting payoff profile, if I may use that analogy. But I think for me, the one thing that I picked up from the story is that you actually quite disciplined in terms of what you want. You decide that this is this, and then you go for that. It's quite rare. And you stick to what you decide on. So it's quite something. And I would say for sure that I do think it is a calling, and it's a calling that you ended up answering, I guess. Could have been a doctor. And it was that one pivotal decision that you made between being a doctor or going into the accounting route, and everything else sort of unfolded from there. It's quite interesting how like one decision that we make can actually frame the rest of our lives. I think I find it quite...
It is actually quite, yeah.
It's quite something.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I think you're right, because at the time, you're probably not qualified to make the decision. Yes. You're doing it in your youth and, spur of the moment. And yeah, but I think things, in a weird way, things have a way of working out. And I think possibly what we might underestimate is that like there's a lot of intrinsics that are helping you make the decision, like they innate in you, and they kind of driving you in a direction, because it's your skill set, it's your knowledge base, and it's things that appeal to you already. So you're not kind of going to something that's like foreign, like if and so that kind of helps, so that that grounds your decision making, and often that's why actually you look back, you're like, oh, things have a way of working out, but actually it's certain things that and strengths that were in you that were guiding you, even though you weren't conscious of every aspect of them.
So I actually recently read something on X. It's called Twitter for those of us who are old. It said that my oldest daughter once quit the school swimming team because she doesn't come from a long line of swimmers.
Yeah.
And then you said we couldn't argue. Well, her younger sister is here lengthening that line. So in the same spirit, what long line are you creating with your career, and how do you take the elevator down to lift as you rise?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. What's been encouraging to see about, I think also something like the CFA, because it's a global charter, it's kind of globally competitive. It then helps you to gauge yourself about where's South Africa in the context.
Yes.
In the global context. And I recently actually and they may have just been saying this, but is a research provider that we use that had a conference in Joburg and Cape Town, and they brought one of the senior guys, and they and the way he started the meeting was that, listen, we have 60 strategists in our team. There's very little we agree upon, but the one thing we all agree is that South Africans as investors tend to know a lot more about what's happening around the world, and we think it's because you guys are affected by, like, your currency is the first to feel it, your commodity prices are the first to feel it, and so you've got to be quite sensitive to what's going on.
Yeah.
And that was quite an eye-opening statement that, geez, here's this guy, they kind of have the top clients globally of asset managers, and he thinks that the South African industry is probably like the most knowledgeable on some of these things. So, and then you marry that with the CFA that gives you a kind of an ability to gauge yourself globally and where's the industry. And again, we kind of punch above our weight in terms of charter holders. So I think, and so I'm kind of connecting a lot of dots.
Yes. Okay.
So last year I went on a trip to Japan, a research trip. We just met with something like 30 companies or so in the space of a week, and my colleague again went this year. But one of the things that struck me was that the government, they've kind of rolled out the red carpet. They're like, we'll fund your startup costs, we'll fund your license, tax breaks. So they're really trying to get, people to grow that asset management industry in Japan. And actually the reason they want to do that is because they looked around and they said, geez, our society has lagged on a wealth per capita basis. And the reason they've lagged is because they've kept their money in cash all this time, now, which has been a big opportunity cost. And why have they kept their money in cash? Because the companies weren't growing, yes, right? And so they were not enticed to do so. So they then went around these reforms for companies to basically not sit on cash, to make investments or pay out the money to shareholders, improve shareholder returns, which then would entice society to invest and would then grow their wealth per capita. So sometimes when I think about the industry, the asset management industry, I do think actually we've got a real opportunity to grow a meaningful global industry from where we sit, and to actually create opportunities for youngsters to come with the businesses that can compete globally. with the skill set that's required. And so that's something that I'd would like to see borne out.
Yes.
If you to think about like what kind of line would like to leave, that would be, if we can make a dent on that. I think that at least from this conversation, I can see that the perception is that our perception is right about ourselves, that actually we can do it. And so now it's about putting it together.
I can't wait to see it all unfold. I think conversation is a start, and then action follows.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And then, like, maybe I want to find your thoughts on something. So, who, like, people always have things to say to you, like, and I guess where I'm going with this thought is, who would you say was your biggest critic, and what do they get wrong?
Your critics are actually in a weird way, your best people, because they give you this fire that just, you just want to prove them wrong. So, and sometimes actually and I guess that's the also the hard part is that you've got to find a way to be both your biggest critic and your biggest supporter, so you're able to kind of understand your mistakes, but then you don't live in them. You also, so I do think in a way that I'm my biggest critic, and then but kind of also then don't just stay there, then grow from that criticism. But I think I'd say that the thing that you want to prove, that that I think I've been able to prove is persistence. Actually, is the ability to not to let something be a stumbling block or a tombstone, but actually to persist and to continue. So that I would say that would be the thing that they would have gotten wrong.
Interesting. And then, what have you found to be a non-negotiable in your career?
I've never thought about it, but I would say that kind of as you asked the question, I think there's things that are in your control and kind of not, and I'd say that it's been important to continue to focus on the things that are in my control. So that would be the one, and always to kind of give to give your best and in every kind of output, and then to enjoy it as well. It's like it's a journey, so not just the destination. Sometimes can be so focused on the destination that we lose the journey, but it's been important to enjoy it.
Yes.
It's those three things.
Okay. And then I think as we reflect on all that you've spoken about today, the lessons, the mentoring, the wins and the setbacks, some of the setbacks that you've experienced, I was interested to know, like, what's your why for doing all this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say, like, for me personally, a big driver is, I'd say is a religious one. I think that's been a very big why for me, actually, from my youth. So that's
Okay. How has your view of success changed over time?
That's a very good question. And, I think sometimes especially maybe when you're in a business that is, everything is measurable. The AUM is measurable, the performance is measurable, and it's public, and so you get very tempted to then use the external metrics, to determine whether or not you're successful, or if you're happy with the outcome, and also it's very peer relative. So again, the performance gets published and you compare yourself to the peers, and the AUM is very public, and again, it's something that you can easily compare. And so what I've had to learn is that you've got to drown out kind of all that, and kind of be content with your journey. So I've had to really learn that it's about being content with where you are, and that's actually the grapple. And I think for people that generally, are very driven, ambitious, hungry, have a point to prove, the temptation is that you're always on that treadmill, and actually you're not satisfied, you're not content with anything. So the challenge has actually been to get myself to be content, and for me that's my definition of success. It's actually getting to that point of not wanting more, but being content. Yeah.
Because it doesn't stop.
It doesn't stop.
It does not stop. You continuously want more and more. And how much is enough?
Exactly. Yeah.
So as we wrap up, thinking about the whole arc of your journey, what's your story in one line, or in a quote, or in a book, a song?
So I'll try to give a short one line, which has been we've come a long way. That would be the journey, and I think over the Christmas break last year, I took a few days actually to go to see my grandfather in Mthatha and so on. Walked around in Mthatha, and it was really, kind of cathartic in that sense, because now I was faced with the reality of actually, geez, it's been a really long ride to get to this point. That would be the kind of one line.
That is actually quite beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. Lonwabo, thank you for joining us at the Charters table. Congratulations on your promotion, and good luck. We'll be rooting for you, and certainly we'll be watching.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Okay. Hearing Lonwabo share his story makes us realize that being patient actually has an interesting payoff profile. It will test you, it will break you sometimes, but it will mold you and make you something that you never imagined could happen. And all it takes is discipline and a bit of focus, and the rest will take care of itself. Thank you. If you have any questions, submit a question via email at info@thecharterstable.co.za.